Hello, my name's Steve B and I'm a presenter on Indie Live Radio. I present Music and Musings every Friday night at 7. The music, that's 70s classic rock, although we will take the occasional side road. The musings, well, they're thoughts on Scottish independence, politics and world events from my viewpoint, which is that of a grumpy old man. So join me every Friday night at 7 on Indie Live Radio, a new voice for a new Scotland.
Hi, I'm Fiona from Clackman and Show Women for Independence. Did you know we have a podcast on Indie Live Radio? Goes out at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, repeated at 6 o'clock on a Thursday. Come and join us for some news, views, opinions, the odd poem. It'd be very nice to have you with us. And come and hear the news you're not getting. Here's some new voices for a new Scotland at Indie Live Radio.
Hi, James E here from the Saturday show on indylive.radio. We play a wide selection and wide genre of music for your entertainment. We're on Saturday mornings from 10 till 1 p.m. Remember, join us on indylive.radio, a new voice for a new Scotland.
Hi, this is Marley and I'm here to tell you a bit about Daytime Live show, which goes out Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays on Indie Live Radio at 11:30 for a couple of hours. So I present the programme along with Val, and we're there with a variety of guests to chat to each day. Now, at the moment, Wednesday's show is a catch-up edition. It's not live. What we do is we rebroadcast some of the more recent interviews. So we hope we enjoy all of those. Be there at 11:30 on Indie Live Radio. For the news you don't hear elsewhere, a new voice for a new Scotland.
Film, you can watch this again, you can be part of it. It's Independence Live, yeah. A few people asked about YouTube. It'll be YouTube/Independence Live. That's where you'll find the footage.
No Westminster. No Westminster, come on. No Westminster, not for me, not for me. But before I'll be your slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom, come on. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom, one more. Oh, freedom over me. But before I be your slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free.
I know his son very well.
Yeah.
Ah, here we are.
Here we go.
Well,
Perfect.
good evening, everyone, and welcome to the TNT show. You know, it's been another great day for British democracy. It seems the UK has the least respected leader in the whole of Europe, and he's vying to be the world's worst. How about that? In other news today at PMQs, the Prime Minister was asked by the SNP's Kirsty Blackman. She asked him if he could list Mr. Trump's qualities, because he'd been expounding at great length of how Mr. Trump was an asset to the world community. And there was a long delay before he could answer, well, he is the president. That's it. That's his quality. Some people might say that's a reality rather than a quality, but there you are. For Boris Johnson, that's a quality. Hey, my name is John Drummond, and I'm your host for the next 60 minutes. And they're going to be action-packed minutes, I can promise you. Thanks for joining us this evening. We have yet another great guest. I know what you're thinking. We've had a load of great guests on the show, but believe me, Joe Goldblatt is special. And I'm really excited that he's able to join us this evening. Stay with us for his amazing story. It's 60 minutes. It's going to be action-packed, including his dealings with the same Mr. Trump that we talked about just 2 seconds ago. But first, a few words about TNT. TNT, as you know by now, stands for The Nation Talks. So in many respects, this is your show, right? And remember, you can send us questions live during the show. We've already got some here, but you can contact us live with your questions because it's your show, okay? Oh, and by the way, in my column in Sunday National, I again challenged the BBC last weekend to come on this show and to explain why Scots should trust their coverage. So far, no response. I expect they're still cowering in Pacific Quay, but the offer remains on the table. Now, to our guest, Professor Joe Goldblatt. Joe is from Dallas, Texas, and has wound up as an emeritus professor at a major Scottish university. How about that? Joe, how are you coping with the pandemic?
Thanks, John. It's so great to see you and have what we call an old stairwell rammy tonight. A good chat up with you. I've missed talking with you. Well, we have been self-isolating. We've been following all the rules that our beloved First Minister and her leadership team of scientists have set. But there was good news, hope on the horizon yesterday. I took my afternoon stroll through the city center of Edinburgh, and I looked up in the sky, and lo and behold, what did I see? The Balmoral clock. And John, it was ticking again. That minute hand was starting to move forward, and I thought, progress. Scotland is now getting ready to finally reawaken after this pandemic. So I see hope on the horizon.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit about your background, Joe. And first of all, first thing you've got to tell us about the tartan that you're wearing tonight.
Oh, thanks for asking. Well, that's part of our background. We have absolutely no Scottish ancestry at all. But a few years ago, I had had a serious back operation, and I received a telephone call from Deirdre Kinloch Anderson, the doyen of the great Kinloch Anderson Highland Dress Company that has been in business now for 6 generations. They're one of Scotland's oldest businesses. And Deirdre said, Joe, while you're recovering, what we would love to do is design your family tartan to give you something to look forward to once you're up and around again. So I said, well, Deirdre, we have no Scottish ancestry. She said, it doesn't matter. Tartan is Scotland's gift to the world. Well, I thought that was tremendous, and especially when she said, the design will be our gift to you. And so once I felt better, I went down to her offices, and she said to me, I need to ask you 3 questions to be able to design your tartan. What brought you to Scotland? She said. I told her that it was the university where I'd been appointed, and that's why we chose the colors of blue. Then she said, what do you most love about Scotland? Well, I'm a major fan of Robert Burns. And so the purple thistle of Ayrshire, which is part of this tartan, is in honor of the great bard. And finally, she said, your surname is Goldblatt. Let's include some gold. And so you're looking at tartan number 11,231, registered tartan in Scotland, and the only Goldblatt in the history of this country. And we're so proud of it because it's helped weave us into the national story of Scotland. And the way we came to Scotland was really quite simple. My
Joe, save that for a second,
okay,
because we've had a question from the States.
Yes.
It's from Ashbury, and she's saying she has a friend in Philadelphia who said that if Donald Trump is re-elected in November, she hopes to retire in Scotland. She will have a very comfortable pension to support herself. And the question she's asking are there any difficulties which she might expect? And could you please ask Joe if others may follow in her footsteps? Would you recommend other Americans come here?
Thank you for that question. And I actually taught in Philadelphia for 3 years at Temple University, so I'm pleased to hear from somebody from the city of brotherly love. First of all, this brings us to independence, because once Scotland becomes an independent country and we are able to have control of our own borders, we will welcome the world. We'll want you to come here, bring your family, start a business, work in the NHS. We want you to come to Scotland and be a contributing citizen. There are no major difficulties in moving to Scotland. The only ones are the subtle cultural differences. For example, I once walked into a hotel because I was setting up a trade show, an exhibition in Glasgow, and I needed some carpeting for the stall. And I asked the front desk, "Do you have any shag?" Well, the young woman at the front desk frowned at me and she said, "How dare you, sir? This is not that kind of hotel." I said, "Well, I mean carpet." She said, "Oh, whew," because in Scotland, shag means a transaction with a lovely lady. So it's a very different expression.
So obviously, you're saying that people in your experience will be welcome here. Tell us a little bit more about your background, though. I mean, you were a performer, right?
Yes,
what was
actually, my book of memoirs, which was just published a year ago, May, is entitled The Performer, the Producer, and the Professor, because those were the three parts of my life. I started out as a performer. After graduating from university, I moved to Washington, D.C., met my wife. We formed a mime company called the Wonder Company. We performed all over the world. Then we started being asked by our clients if we could hire other performers to perform in shopping centers, because in those days, the mega mall was being born, and there were these big shopping centers with hundreds of stores, and they needed entertainment to attract people to the shopping center. So we organized that all over the United States for many years, about 20 years. And then, having produced the inaugural events for President George H.W. Bush, produced the opening of the Nashville, Tennessee Convention Center, and other major events, including one for the current president of the United States, we sold the company. And upon selling the company, I began asking, what should I do next? I've been a professor, I've been a producer, I've been a performer, I've been a producer. And the thought occurred to me that I had been doing what's called expert witness testimony, where you go into the courtroom and you testify on behalf of the defense or the plaintiff about a case. And they had hired me because I actually wrote the very first textbook in the field of event management. I was one of the few authors. And in doing that research, I began to see, John, there was a link to live events with anthropology, sociology, theology, and this new thing called technology. And I wondered if I could start a university program. And so I contacted a friend of mine, Stedman Graham, who's been the partner of Oprah Winfrey, the American television presenter, for almost 40 years. And I said, Stedman, if I was to do this, would you and Oprah endorse it, support it? I had produced an event for Oprah, so we knew one another. He said, yes, but on one condition. You must first offer this to universities where the students have historically been marginalized from business. He was talking about historic black universities. We don't have those in Europe, but in the United States, after the Civil War, to promote tertiary education, they created these universities for African Americans. So Stedman and I went to different universities, pitched the program. They said, great idea. This was 89, 90, the Iraq War. They said, we have no money. And make a long story short, simultaneously, my wife was talking to a friend in Washington, D.C. The friend's husband happened to be the dean of a medical school at George Washington University. He talked to the president of the university. The next thing I know, I have a telephone call. Would you please come up and meet with the president? I do. And he says, if you will start this program on our campus, the first undergraduate and postgraduate degree program in events management, I'll offer you a full bursary to earn your PhD and research assistance and an office and support. Well, how can you turn that down? So we relocated back to Washington, started that program. Then I was appointed dean at a large hospitality school in Providence, Rhode Island. And then I was invited to come to Philadelphia at Temple University. And one day, out of the blue, a call came from a woman in Scotland who said, I heard you speak at a conference. We have a post.
Hold that for a second, Joe. Let's come on to that in a second, if we may. For the benefit of folks who don't know, what is events management? How do you describe it?
Right. Well, I actually define it as planned events, and it simply means that you incorporate in the strategy of any organization, whether it be a corporation or a third sector organization, you incorporate a strategy for improvement, for continuous improvement, progression, and you do this through one event at a time. So the Latin word for events is a venire, and what that literally means, John, is outcome. A for out, venire for come. So every event that's produced in an organization is an outcome, whether it be a wedding, funeral, a confirmation, a new product launch event. All of these are outcomes. And so in that curriculum, we teach people how to strategically produce those outcomes.
Right. So you take people from perhaps with no background at all in events management and take them all the way through the process. I mean, what, a 2, 3, 4 year process? Is that?
They were 3 and 4 year and postgraduate courses. I created the first MBA in event leadership at Johnson & Wales University. There are doctorates now in the field of event management. But because you're a experienced trainer and teacher, you'll appreciate this. When we did the first study in the field of event management to see what background people working in the field came from, do you know the majority came from education? They were former teachers, because in the classroom, what are you doing? Producing outcomes.
Yeah, very much. See, take us back for a second to your dealings with Donald Trump. What happened?
When we owned our company in Washington, D.C., we received a telephone call one afternoon. Gentleman said, I'm working for Donald Trump. I'm his director of entertainment. We are opening the world's largest and most expensive casino in Atlantic City. In those days, the construction cost was $1 billion. This was 1998, 99. I said, how may I help you? Said, the guy that we hired to produce this hasn't worked out. We'd like you to come and talk to us. Well, the next morning I was on an airplane. Up I went, sat with them and asked the simple question, tell me about outcomes. What do you want to achieve? And they said, well, we'd like Mr. Trump to actually rub an Aladdin's lamp, laser beams to come out of the nozzle of the Aladdin's lamp, a giant lamp, a genie to appear on a screen, and so on and so on, and ending with saturation fireworks in the sky. And I said, well, we can do that. Let me go back and write a scenario. So I went back, wrote a scenario, added a few bits and bobs. They said, you've got the job. The contract was for $300,000 in those days. $150,000 was paid upon signing the contract. The balance, John, was due the day of the opening at 1 p.m. Well, 1 p.m. came, no check. 2 p.m., no check. 3 p.m., no check. It was to go live on television at 7 p.m. that night, just as we are today. I picked up, in those days we didn't have mobile phones, so I picked up my radio, which was a walkie-talkie, and said, let me have the controller, the finance man for the casino. And I said, if I don't receive $150,000 in a certified bank check or cash, remember, John, this was a casino, they had the cash. They could have sent the cash. I said, I'm going to dismiss the entire cast and crew. 150,000 or we all leave. Within 5 minutes, out of a crowd of 40,000 people, a man walked up wearing a long black coat, black hat, silver sunglasses. He was about 6'4". He reached in his vest pocket, and I thought, oh my gosh, the man's got a gun. Fortunately, he didn't. He had an envelope. He handed it to me. I opened it. It was the check. I immediately gave it to my wife, and I said, deposit this at the bank. She went to all the banks. They were all closed because it was Saturday evening. But in that time, they had started opening for the first time something called an automatic teller machine, the hole in the wall that we know here. She deposited the check, and it was instant liquidity. It was cashed by the bank. And then, of course, when I came to Scotland, what did I learn? This is the country that invented the world, as you know, and one of our inventions was the software for the automatic teller machine. Thank goodness!
So you got paid.
We did.
Did you have any
were one of the
further
few. The other people, the contractors, the man who built the sign, the man who painted the building, the man who poured the asphalt for the parking lot, never paid. We were fortunate.
Really? Did you have any other dealings with Donald Trump?
That was it.
Oh.
That was it. He wrote us a very lovely letter of congratulations that I've since lost. And quite frankly, I'm a little embarrassed. Of course, in those days, he was just starting out, and we didn't know how challenging he was. I'm trying to be polite. I guess the better word would be unscrupulous. And today, I wouldn't have accepted him as a client.
Yeah. Is this casino, is this the one that he managed to he didn't make a success of it? Is that right?
He went into administration 3 times.
Really?
Yeah. And several of his other businesses have gone into administration as well.
And the casino was one of those. It takes a lot of doing to not make money in a casino, for crying out loud. You would have thought that was an absolute certainty for business success.
Yes, well, you would think so. But Atlantic City, because of the coronavirus and because of the recession that has followed it, has really fallen onto very difficult times. I'm not sure it'll survive as a gambling haven. Also, when it started, there were only 2 places for gambling in the United States, Las Vegas and Atlantic City. Now, dozens of American states offer gambling. So it's no longer the unique selling factor that they had before.
Okay. Now, you went on to become the first president of the International Special Events activity. I mean, you pretty much created it, unless I'm mistaken, and you became its first president. How did that come about? What actually happened there? How did that happen to you?
Well, it was serendipity again, John. I believe that serendipity or surprise is the sum total of a good life that's been well lived before it. I happened to be in the right place at the right time. I was seated on a coach with 54 people behind me. I was on the front row because I always got a little motion sickness, so I like to sit up front. And I was at a conference where I had given the keynote speech about the future of the live events industry in Florida. And a man seated next to me was an older gentleman, turned to me and he said, Joe, you see all those people behind you? There's a caterer, there's an entertainment director, there's a decorator, there's a florist. I'm a rental dealer. We each have our own individual associations, but we don't have an umbrella association where we can all come together and transact business. Supply and demand. And I said, so why are you telling me this, Bob? He said, because you're the one to do it. I said, but you don't understand. I don't know anything about starting an association. He said, Joe, look over your shoulder again. And I looked, and he said, they're all behind you. They're all following you. We're all going in the same direction. All you need to do is invite them to a meeting. So the next year at the same annual conference, I invited about 30 people to a meeting, expecting about 10 to show up. So I found the smallest meeting room, John, and I put 5 chairs in it because I wanted it to look full. Well, do you know that over 100 people came to that meeting? There was a queue all the way down the hall while we were waiting for a larger meeting room to become available. So at that moment, I knew we're on to something. And within a few months, we had elected a board. They had asked me to serve as president, and I served for 2 years. And now that association, I'm very pleased to tell you, is known as the International Live Events Association, ILEA. It has over 5,000 members all over the world.
That's amazing. Amazing. Well done. Well done. Tell me how it came about that you moved from the city of brotherly love to Edinburgh, Scotland, to be a professor at Queen Margaret University. How did that come about?
Well, again, serendipity based upon a life, I suppose, well lived. I received a phone call one afternoon in my office at Temple University, and the person on the other end of the call was a female professor who had heard me speak at a conference in Europe. She said, we have received funding to create a professorship, and I was wondering if you might apply for the post. And I thanked her very much, and I said we had just purchased a home in Philadelphia. Our adult sons lived in the United States. I'm sure my wife would not agree to this. A few months went by. She called again, and she said, would you at least do a teleconference with us? I said, teleconference? Well, okay. It happened to be while I was at our summer beach house, so I had to get out of my bathing costume into a business suit, go to a television studio, because in those days, John, we didn't have Skype or social media. You had to actually go, you may remember, to a studio where there was a big satellite dish. And sadly, the signal failed because there was a big thunderstorm. So we used a mobile telephone, right? And the mobile telephones in those days were very big, but the telephone worked. But unfortunately, on the other end of the line, the people interviewing me, all 3 of them were from Glasgow. This meant I didn't understand one word, but I just listened as they spoke. Finally, at the end, one fellow who said he was the dean of the school said, you were pure, dead, brilliant. Well, I heard the word dead, and I thought, that's me done. I'm over. I got in the car, drove, and about 10 minutes later, again the phone rang. It was the principal this time of the university saying, based upon your interview, we'd like to offer you the post. Wow, I said. I'm flattered, but I'll have to get back to you. He said, well, I caution you not to say anything because in Scotland, a verbal agreement is tantamount to a written agreement. I said, you have no worries. I have to talk with the boss. So I got home and I spoke to my wife. Our sons were there in the front garden, told them what happened. And my wife said, I have 3 questions. She says, are there any Jewish people? She happens to be Jewish, as am I. And I said, I don't know. But I checked on my laptop. It made Edinburgh look like Jerusalem, like we were moving to the promised land. Then she said, can we bring our wee dog? We had a small dog. That year they had passed the UK pet scheme, no quarantine. Fine. Finally, can we afford a home? Again, I Googled it, and we could. It would be smaller, but we're now empty nesters. With those 3 yeses, Nancy said, I believe we should go to Scotland. We've been called to Scotland. So off we went, and on my way up, I gave a speech at Oxford University. I'll never forget. It was on tourism, and on the platform with me at the top table for the final dinner was the head of the English tourism organization called Visit England. And he said to me over several drinks, so where are you going tomorrow, Professor? I said, I'm going to Edinburgh to take this post. He said, to Scotland. Don't you know they've lost their minds? I said, what do you mean? He said, they want to be independent. They're too poor. They're too stupid. They're too small. And I thought about my own upbringing, a small little town outside of Dallas, Texas, where very few people went to college, and people were certainly middle class or below. And I looked at him and I said, they sound like my kind of people. Good night.
We've had another question. Oh gracious! It's from the same person, and she's saying, "Well, I'm not sure to see it. I won't assign a gender right now." Hashbury is saying, as I firmly studied music business in the late '90s, I can confirm that an event management course is all important to the wider arts movement. See, this will be music to your ears here. So this is David Henry is asking, most interesting. How did I guess that Trump tried to stiff you? He said, Joe, did you ever meet Bill Graham?
No, I believe that Hashberry's talking about the concert promoter from California, San Francisco. I never met Bill Graham. He was one generation ahead of me. Okay.
So, go back to your story. You got the call. You spoke with Nancy, and you said, look, that we ought to do this, and you stopped en route at Oxford. What were your first reactions to Scotland / Edinburgh?
Well, when I came up to look for housing accommodation, John, I went into a pub thinking everybody would be friendly and we'd be buying each other drinks. I sat at the end of the bar and I told the barman that I was coming to Scotland to take a post. And he said to me, why would you want to do that? I said, well, it's a wonderful city. This is the home of the Scottish Enlightenment, the Edinburgh festivals. And he said, no, it's not. It's a very bad place. I thought, well, they might just be able to use my American optimism in terms of tourism, promoting it here. But that was my first experience. And then that was followed by so many wonderful, positive experiences. During the 2014 Scottish referendum, I was leafleting, handing out leaflets in Portobello, and someone who was not in favor of independence took my leaflet and threw it in my face, literally dashed it in my face. Well, two fellow party activists who were seated on the bench playing banjos beside me leaped out of the bench and chased this guy halfway up Portobello Main Street, High Street, and I was following him. And I was saying, leave him alone, I'm okay. But that, to me, represents the best of Scotland. We do not like bullies. We do not let people bully our friends. We speak up for our friends. We support one another. And I just fell in love with this country.
That's good to know. That's good to know. And one of your sons is now living here too, is that right?
We have two sons, of whom we're very proud. Our youngest son, Sam, works for the Capitol Theatres, which operate the festival theaters, the King's Theatre, and the Studio Theatre here in Edinburgh. Our oldest son, Max, is a professional actor in New York City who has a regular off-Broadway show called The Amazing Max. And he's also, now during the pandemic, when everything is closed, he's doing online magic programs for children in their homes over the internet. And he's done over 500 of these just in the last couple of months. Yeah.
My word. Gracious. And how is he finding life here?
Well, Sam is the real winner of the Scottish Goldblatts. When he came to Scotland, I said, Sam, you know we won't be able to support you. He said, no worries, Papa. He said, I have a business that I'm starting. What's the business, Sam? The 48-hour film project. You buy a license, which he did from a group in the States, and that allows you to invite people once a year to come on a Friday and to organize a film shoot over 48 hours. And 48 hours later, they have to bring back a 7-minute film, and it's shown at a place like the Cameo Theatre or at the cinema in Glasgow. Sam has now done this for 13 years. It is, according to Creative Scotland, the largest producer in the history of Scotland of short films. He receives funding from Creative Scotland and other organizations. But here's why he's the winner. At the first evening, after he started meeting people to develop the project, he meets a woman at a pub, and she later becomes his wife, and together they produce our grandson, Hamish. And they stay in Leith, and we have another grandchild coming the early part of July. So we've been very blessed in Scotland.
Indeed. Perhaps even the 4th of July. How would that work out?
Wouldn't that be something? Yeah.
That would be a fantastic celebration.
Yes. Yes.
So, tell us about your book, The True Joy of Life. Where did you get the title?
Well, thanks for asking, John. I wrote this book in spring of last year, because I decided, having written 38 textbooks during my academic career and always being told what to write and how to write by a publisher in New York or Chicago or wherever, that I wanted this to be my love letter to my family and to my country that adopted us, Scotland. And so, as I said, I divided the book into 3 parts. The performer, when Nancy and I started our career together performing mime all over the world, and then later the producer, where we started producing shows at the White House and other places. And then finally, when I went back to university to earn my doctorate, and for the last 25 years became a professor. And the book has had wonderful, wonderful response. It's been purchased by folks all over the world, which is really gratifying. And I'm very proud of it, because I was able to use the title, The True Joy of Life, which comes from a piece of prose by George Bernard Shaw, the famous playwright, social reformer, philosopher. And what Shaw says in his piece of prose is, I think, very, very wise. He says that this is the true joy of life, the being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being thoroughly worn out before you are thrown on the scrap heap. He says, I'm of the opinion that my life belongs to the community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. Life is no brief candle to me. It is sort of a splendid torch that I have hold up for a moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. And that's the goal of this book.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Hey, we've had a comment on Facebook from Ray Crofter. You'll love this. He says, I know Sam. I've done a number of Glasgow and Edinburgh 40-hour films acting. What a lovely couple. There you are.
That's
unsolicited.
Wonderful. Ray is one of thousands of filmmakers that Sam has encouraged and worked with, and they have produced over the past 13 years, as I've mentioned, over 500 films.
That's fantastic. Now, I must task you on this one. You mentioned George Bernard Shaw and the fact that you're a teacher and you've been a very successful teacher. But he did say, you may recall, that those that can do, those that can't teach. What's your reaction to that?
Well, Mr. Shaw was a very wise fellow. However, one cannot generalize with regards to an institution as vast, wide, deep as the modern academy. In the old days, an academic literally would progress from undergraduate through postgraduate and then just start teaching at the university with very little practical experience outside the classroom. That's no longer the case. In order to be qualified today, you're encouraged to get qualifications beyond the postgraduate degree, such as a chartered marketing qualification or chartered accounting qualification, to be able to demonstrate that you also have some practical experience. So, with all deference to Mr. Shaw, I don't think he could have ever imagined how broad, deep, and exceptional the modern university is today.
You know, people who teach often say to me, you know something, I learn more from my students than I would ever credit that to be the case when I started teaching. Is that your impression too?
Absolutely. I've just co-authored with my successor author, the man who is going to succeed me with these 38 books I've written, who will be responsible for revising them and so on. So I've just written the 8th edition of that first textbook I wrote 30 years ago. And we dedicated it to our students, because our students literally are our teachers.
Yeah. That's fascinating. So many people have said that to me. We've had a question from David Henry on YouTube, and he's asking if you think that Donald Trump will get re-elected.
Well, David, no one really can tell at this early point. And I'll tell you why. The American system is very different from the British or the Scottish system, where we have purdah and the parliament closes and so on. Campaigning goes on for months or years. And also this summer, we're dealing with a pandemic. So the conventions will be smaller. There'll probably be a lot more advertising on television than there was before. Donald Trump has a very loyal base. But I can tell you from the emails and the social media posts I'm getting from my American friends, who were, because of where I grew up in a very conservative part of the United States, were very pro-Trump. They are no longer pro-Trump, and it's because of his moral and ethical missteps. He has, according to his own tweets, been the champion of the economy. But his absence of having a moral and ethical compass is really starting to wake the voting public up. And I hope he will be defeated in November.
Good. Well, it's interesting. The opinion polls, as you say, are fairly conclusive about Biden being ahead, but that's, as you say, that's no real indicator because it's too early in the game and the process hasn't kicked in, and it's a lengthy process. And you could argue that it's important that if you're going to choose somebody who's going to be the leader of the free world effectively, you would want an exhaustive process. You would want to know as much as you could possibly learn about the two candidates. Though I suspect we do know quite a bit about both of them if it comes right down to it. Now, you've been working strongly and firmly in favour of independence. Do you really think it's getting any closer?
I absolutely do. I absolutely feel we're within touching point of independence. The other day I was taking my morning walk in Morningside, and I saw in the windows of a flat the yes signs and the saltires from the Yes campaign back in 2014. They were faded, and they started to look like a distant memory. And I thought, I wonder if we'll ever reach that kind of enthusiasm again after the pandemic. And then I thought, Sean, we're closer than ever before. And the reason we're closer than ever before is because of the way our First Minister and her cabinet and her scientists have handled Scotland's approach to managing this crisis. We have been superior of the four nations. We've been superior in Europe. They turn to us as an example for communications, as an example for caution, etc. So I really think this has been a turning point for us. And as we see the economy start to go south in Scotland dramatically, it's more important than ever before that a woman like Kate Forbes has all the levers of independence in her hands, all of the levers of an independent economy, so that businesses and others can revive as quickly as possible. We don't want to be on the end of a begging bowl from our friends down south. We want to be partners in generating a better economy for all nations.
Well, that seems to make sense. Do you have any I mean, one of the issues about independence is how people vote. And there is a preponderance, it certainly was my experience, of people in, let's put it this way, in later years, opting to vote no. Do you have any sense of how that may or may not have changed?
Well, I have just the opposite experience in my own home. During the 2014 independence referendum, I've told this story, by the way, privately to our First Minister to encourage her to keep fighting the good fight. I was, of course, pro-yes, and I spent every day that I could at a street stall or leafleting, canvassing, etc. But my wife, like many female voters, was quite concerned about independence. She was concerned from a security standpoint, from an economy standpoint, etc. So we never spoke about it at home. We went to the polls, we voted. I went to Ingliston to count the millions of votes. I came home at 4 a.m. in the morning, defeated, exhausted, got into bed, and she leaned over and she whispered in my ear, "Did we win?" And I said, now wide awake, "Did we win? You told me you were voting no." She said, "When I went in the poll, I thought of all the people that we love in this country and who love us. And I had to vote with my heart and with my hope for a better country. And I believe there are millions of more just like that who will go to the polls when we do this again, and they will vote for a better Scotland."
And do you think there will be an early opportunity to do this again?
Well, I think that our First Minister and her advisors are absolutely geniuses when it comes to timing. As she's often said, she will not call another poll until we have a significant majority. And as I've always said, when we go to the polls to vote for independence, we must not win by a margin. John, we must win by a mandate. And a mandate is 60%. So right now, the latest polls show we're at 52%, 53%. I don't think it'll be long before we're within touching point of 60%. And I think that's when she'll say, green light, let's get on with it.
But what does that mean, though? Because she's also saying that she would seek a Section 30 order. And it's entirely in the gift of Boris Johnson or whoever happens to be the Prime Minister at that time, that he might say, "Hey, I hear what you're saying, but frankly, I've got lots of problems on my hands. I think this would be a distraction." Whatever excuse. I mean, he must have a whole armory of excuses there, a whole arsenal of excuses. And he may well just set his face against it and say, "No, I'm not going to give you that Section 30. What do you think should happen there?
Well, I think the democratic process is always the best, even if it takes a little bit longer. A wise man once said, and my father often quoted this, democracy is the most difficult, most confusing, most volatile of all systems of government. But if you don't like it, just try the others. So I think democracy at the end of the day must prevail. And I also think that Harold Macmillan said, speaking of my profession, when he was asked by a journalist, "What keeps you awake at night, Prime Minister?" And you remember, John, he famously said, "Events, boy, events."
Events, yes.
And I think the events of the pandemic and the events of the depression that's going to follow the pandemic may just push this along in Westminster, that they have no choice but to grant this order for an election.
Yeah, I mean, it's often the case that for successful independence movements, the sort of breakdown of the sort of those who are involved in the voting process generally is a third. There's a third who are utterly opposed and will never change their minds, and a third who are absolutely dedicated to bringing about constitutional change. And it's the folks in the middle who tend to decide what the outcome is going to be. So the question really is, what arguments do you think have been apparent recently that might have worked to persuade the folks in the middle to opt for change?
Well,
Because
John,
change-
actually, I don't think we get to independence through acrimony. We get there through conversation. So when I go to doorsteps and do knock-ups, I often say, my name is Professor Joe Goldblatt. I support Scottish independence. And I was wondering what your views are. And they will often say, as you suggested, I'm against it, or I'm for it, or I haven't decided. And if they haven't decided, I then say, well, let me tell you what my vision is for a greater Scotland. I envision a Scotland where every child will have the best education all the way through tertiary, and it'll be free. Mind sharing with me what your vision is? And they often will say, well, I have a similar vision. That's exactly what I'm thinking. And I use that as a starting point to say, now, how do we get there as soon as possible to benefit these wee bairn and future generations? And when they realize the money that we would have if we were an independent nation to fund the schools, to fund the universities, they begin to give me what I call the eyebrow effect. They go from this to, that's interesting. And that's what I think we have to do. We have to open conversations, not try and convince, but open conversations.
But I think I think that sounds very, very helpful, because generally speaking, when you engage in conversations, there is an opportunity, certainly a chance of some kind, that the other person may come towards you to meet you on this discussion, whatever it may be. But you've got a near neighbour who is the MP for a adjoining constituency, Ian Murray. What if Ian Murray was here just now? What would you say to him?
Well, I'd say, Mr. Murray, first of all, I'm really sorry that you're the only Labour MP in our country. This does not show democracy is working well, that your party is so weak and so disrespected in our country that we don't have a more stronger opposition. And then I would also say, rather than always criticizing the SNP and the other parties, I would like to hear what your vision is through the Labour Party of Scotland, not the Labour Party of England, but the Labour Party of Scotland, what your vision is for a stronger, better, more sustainable country. And I think he's capable of that. I just don't hear that rhetoric. What I hear is criticism, complaint, hand-wringing. I'm the kind of guy, John, who stops wringing his hands and starts rolling up his sleeves, because I like to get things done.
Yeah, the position right now is somewhat, it's categorically anti-democratic, because, as I understand it, in these latest pronouncements, both Murray and the Scottish Labour Party have said that they will not agree even to a referendum. So, in other words, they're saying, not only wouldn't we support independence in a referendum, we would prefer to deny you the choice of a referendum, which to most people's ears sounds hugely undemocratic. I mean,
yes.
Take your licks by all means, but for goodness sake, why tell people that you don't believe in democracy? It seems a very odd position for a democratic politician to adopt.
And it doesn't help. It doesn't help. By the way, John, I believe you were going to ask me, while we're talking about independence, a question one of my former students asked about the hospitality industry. Shall we turn to that now before we finish tonight?
I'm glad you reminded me. It's from Callum.
Yes.
And Callum is asking, Joe, what do you think about independence and how it might affect the hospitality, tourism and events sector, and the career prospects for young adults entering that workforce?
Oh, I'm so delighted that I had the privilege of teaching a student that could ask such an intelligent, high-level question. So thank you, Callum. Callum, not since Sir Walter Scott wrote The Lady of the Lake and created mass tourism from England coming to Scotland, has there ever been a better opportunity for Scotland's tourism and hospitality industries to flourish than through Scottish independence. And the reason is we will have control of our international borders. We can, as I said earlier, welcome the world to Scotland so that we will be able to promote tourism, deliver high quality experiences, fund tourism effectively, because we'll finally have the funding available to do this. So, Callum, Sir Walter Scott is smiling right now, saying, get on with it, Scotland. Bring out the tartan again. You don't need to do this for the king to arrive. You need to do this to say to the world, you're welcome.
Well, that sounds very encouraging, and I hope you'll be heartened by that. On this different topic entirely, what's your thoughts about people being upset about statues and feeling that they're not appropriate representations of the present day society? What's your take on that?
Well, as you know, John, this movement of taking down statues by public unrest and protest started in the United States, and it goes back to the Civil War unfinished business in the States. In some parts of the United States, they still describe the Civil War as the War of Northern Aggression, not as the Civil War. And many mayors in the United States, including in my mother's home city of New Orleans, Louisiana, removed these statues right away for political purposes, to quell, protest and so on, satiate people's concerns. Well, I'm opposed to the arbitrary removal of statues. I would rather do what Sir Jeff Palmer has been lobbying for in Edinburgh and now has been successful. The Dundas statue at St. Andrew's Square will soon have a plaque telling the rest of the story. And the rest of the story, of course, is that he was involved in the slave trade and he was an opponent to abolition for many, many years. And that will be publicly available so that one day I can bring my grandson and say, you see this beautiful statue? Here's the rest of the story. And let him ask me any questions about it. If statues are to be removed, I think they should be repositioned in places where the history can still be told. One example of this is the Burns Memorial in Edinburgh, the Burns Monument, rather, in Edinburgh on Regent Terrace. That had a wonderful statue of Robert Burns in it. But because of weather conditions and damage to the statue, they decided in the 1960s to reposition it. It's now in the National Portrait Gallery, and it's part of the gallery of all the heroes of Scotland as you walk in. And I think we might do the same thing with some of these controversial statues. Find a place and tell the story.
Yeah, because, they are part of history. The individuals are part of history. The broader question is, should they be placed in an environment where they're looked up to if they're deeply flawed? Or perhaps, as you say, put somewhere where the story could be told, but not necessarily in a sort of hugely approving way. And maybe they ought to be replaced by others who folks might consider more deserving, perhaps.
Well, I'm very concerned with any attempt to expunge history, because as a member of the Jewish people, whose community suffered the greatest atrocity in the history of the world, the Holocaust, we still today have people who are Holocaust deniers. Yeah. And therefore, we need the evidence, we need the history that these things happen. So how those statues are positioned, how it's staged, I'll leave to wiser talents than my own. But I do think we should not forget our history.
I think you're right there. I mean, how do you feel about this councillor from Aberdeen, this Conservative, who's been reinstated, even though he is a Holocaust denier? I mean, have you followed the story?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not unique. This is not unique to Scotland. It's happened all over the world, and it's particularly difficult right now in Europe, in mainland, on the continent. So it's a reality. You know, the Jews for over 4,000 years have suffered persecution. That's why they call us the people of the book. because when we were run out of little villages and towns, the only thing we could take with us was our clothes on our back and our books. And so that's why that name has always come for the Jewish people. So I think we simply need to be ever vigilant. And that's why I'm active in organizations such as the Edinburgh Interfaith Association to promote appreciation, understanding, and tolerance.
What exactly is the Interfaith Association? I mean, you do a podcast, don't you?
We do every Tuesday at 1 p.m. If you simply go to our Facebook site, Edinburgh Interfaith Association, you see a live broadcast co-hosted by myself and a woman of the Muslim faith, Nasim Assad, and our executive director is a Christian, and his name is Ian Stewart. And we bring guests from different religions to talk about their various faith practices and the community action that their churches and synagogues and mosques are involved in. So it's a 1-hour broadcast, and then it's rebroadcast on Thursday evening at 6 p.m. As a longer broadcast.
And people can access this on the Facebook? Or,
yes, Edinburgh Interfaith Association, and also on our YouTube site. Just Edinburgh Interfaith Association. And while we're talking about websites, John, for those who would like to get a copy of my book, I have my own website, which is www.joegoldblatt.scot. www.joegoldblatt.scot. And I would be very happy for any of your viewers to personally inscribe a book and post it out to them.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that we've we've had a caller who said, I shall be purchasing your book. Take care. Be safe.
Thank you. And same to you.
Isn't that nice? You know, so terrific. Joe, thanks for being a wonderful guest tonight. Is there any parting comment you would like to make before we close?
No, it was us that I started by saying we would have a stairwell Rami and a good chat up because, John, I have known you for a long time, and I'm a great admirer of the work that you've done with our Scottish constitutional process. And I just hope and believe with all my heart that within my lifetime, Scotland will become an independent country. But because my lifetime is advanced now and is getting shorter by the day, John, let's get on with it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Let's get on with it. Folks, there's the theme to take from tonight's conversation. A great interview. Thank you very much, Joe. Let me just say a few words before we close. I'd like to say a big thank you, not just to Joe, who's been fantastic, but also to you who've been watching tonight. And for all your questions. I think we got through most of them, but I'm very grateful to you because this is the Nation Talks. And Joe's been talking, I've been talking, but you've been talking too, which I think is fantastic. And I hope you'll be able to enjoy 60 full minutes where somebody is there to explain and to dare I say it, to educate. And I think that's hugely important. Somebody wrote to us last week and said, they like the show because it's intelligent, articulate, compelling, and entertaining. I think Joe has done all of that and more tonight. So a big thank you to him and to you for watching. We have a formidable list of guests coming up, let me tell you. And next week, we have Colette Walker of the new Independence for Scotland party. Don't miss it. I think it will be interesting. I'm sure it will be interesting. So join us next Wednesday at 7 p.m. To listen to Colette. In the meantime, do look out for my Constitution column in the Scottish National this weekend. I won't be writing it this time. It'll be Elliot Bulmer, and he will be focusing in on a specific constitutional issue that has become increasingly important over the last period of time. And more importantly, and this is a heartfelt plea, could you please support Indie Live and Indie Live Radio? These are new voices for a new Scotland and for all the news that you're not getting. And if you like the TNT show, send them a donation for Indie Live. Do it now. Don't hesitate. Give them all the help you can. Okay. We're still talking to the BBC and asking them to come on the show to explain why the Scots ought to trust their output. They haven't so far responded, but we live in hope. And if you get a chance to get on their case, then please do so. We're almost finished. Again, I would like to say a heartfelt thanks to Joe and to all of you for joining us tonight. Thank you again. And remember, it's a great day for democracy. Good night, all.
Cheers, John.
Slange, Joe.
Slange, John. Slange, everyone. Slange.
Hello, my name's Steve B and I'm a presenter on Indy Live Radio. I present Music and Musings every Friday night at 7. The music, that's 70s classic rock, although we will take the occasional side road. The musings, well, they're thoughts on Scottish independence, politics and world events from my viewpoint, which is that of a grumpy old man. So join me every Friday night at 7 on Indy Live Radio, a new voice for a new Scotland.
Hi, I'm Fiona from Clackmannanshire Women for Independence. Did you know we have a podcast on Indy Live Radio? Goes out at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, repeated at 6 o'clock on a Thursday. Come and join us for some news, views, opinions, the odd poem. Be very nice to have you with us. And come and hear the news you're not getting. Here's some new voices for a new Scotland at Indy Live Radio.
Hi, James E here from the Saturday show on indylive.radio. We play a wide selection and wide genre of music for your entertainment. We're on Saturday mornings from 10 till 1 p.m. Remember, join us on indylive.radio, a new voice for a new Scotland.
Hi, this is Marley and I'm here to tell you a bit about Daytime Live show, which goes out Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays on Indy Live Radio at 11:30 for a couple of hours. So I present the programme along with Val, and we're there with a variety of guests to chat to each day. Now, at the moment, Wednesday's show is a catch-up edition. It's not live. What we do is we rebroadcast some of the more recent interviews. So we hope we enjoy all of those. Be there at 11:30 on Indy Live Radio. For the news you don't hear elsewhere, a new voice for a new Scotland.
Film, you can watch this again, you can be part of it. It's Independence Live, yeah. A few people asked about YouTube. It'll be YouTube/Independence Live. That's where you'll find it.
No Westminster. No Westminster, come on. No Westminster, not for me, not for me. But therefore I'll be your slave. I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom, come on. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom, one more. Oh, freedom over me. But before I be your slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home.